Welcome to Sonnet Stories, fiction in 14 lines. I'm Cindy Ellen Hill, a poet from Vermont, and I am obsessed with that old formal style of poetry called the sonnet. And what we'll do here in this quick workshop is look at a way to use a sonnet in a fresh new light in that trendy form of literature that's in all the journals now called flash fiction, by using the sonnet form to write short stories within the 14 lines of the sonnet. What is a sonnet? Well, this may raise memories of some dusty days of high school English past when you read William Shakespeare's sonnet in your English class and perhaps were compelled to write a love sonnet using his form. But sonnets actually first appeared in Sicily in the early 1200s, and they were written in a little bit of a different structure than was later used in English. They were brought into the English in the 1500s by a few other gentlemen shortly before William Shakespeare picked them up and began to use them. And in that process, the form was changed a little bit. A sonnet usually consists of 14 lines. It usually demonstrates some type of meter or rhythm. That is, each line has a set of beats to it, almost like a song. And it usually employs a rhyme scheme. I say usually because you may have been taught in high school English that these are hard and fast rules, but in fact, sonnet writers have used all sorts of variations in how they have structured a sonnet. What you'll usually see as the two most common structures of a sonnet are the Italian sonnet and the English sonnet. The Italian sonnet divides those 14 lines into the octet, the first 8 lines, which is often written as 2 quatrains. A quatrain is just a fancy poet word for 4 lines that make a stanza. The rhyme scheme for those 2 quatrains is usually A, B, B, A, B, B, A. Then there's a volta, which is the poetry word for a turn or a change. It's actually Italian, as the words octet and sestet are. It means there's a change in tone between the first 8 lines and the last 6 lines. Then there's the sestet, or the last 6 lines that are in a different rhyme scheme, and these vary all over the place, and you can look at it as a set of 3 lines and 3 lines. The English or Shakespeare sonnet is usually 3 quatrains, that is 3 stanzas of 4 lines, rhyming A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. And then there's a volta, that turn or change before that last couplet, the GG. Those final 2 lines are a rhyming couplet. Part of the reasons for these changes is that it's a lot harder to rhyme in English than it is in Italian. So how do you turn this classical sonnet into flash fiction? What makes a sonnet feel like a sonnet is the movement. Thanks to the volta, the feel of the sonnet, the direction of the sonnet changes from the beginning to the end. So it has a bit of a story arc. What you started out thinking or feeling in the beginning is different when you reach the end of the sestet or that last couplet. And we can take advantage of this movement to use the sonnet as a form for flash fiction. So here are 2 quick examples. This first one is an English sonnet, except you'll see that in the 3rd quatrain I changed the rhyme form because I'm like that. I write sonnets in all different sorts of rhyme schemes and rarely stick strictly to one or another. But this is primarily an English sonnet, and it's called Mailbox. He brought his packages to the front door, tape popping off the shiny printed paper from the cold, each labeled who it's for, their children's names inscribed in Sharpie marker. He did not want to set them in the snow, so lightly tapped the door with booted feet. The house was quiet. As he turned to go, he saw the mailbox lying in the street. The door opened behind him, and he tried to lock the racing pulse of hope inside. Damn plow knocked the mailbox down again, she said, and took the presents, looking past him. He nodded. In my truck, I got my toolbox, he said. I can do it. I can fix this. And here's another example, this time in the Italian sonnet form. It's called The Shadow of a Crow. Against blue sky, high above May's budding fringe of chartreuse mist, along a road of placid lives where lawns are smoothly mowed, battle to the death is fiercely raging. Excoriating cries and beating wings, two robins fly against a murderous foe, pressing their attack, darting to and fro, first diving, sharp claws bare, now barreling upward as if they had been shot from slings. Outnumbered and outsized, surely they know the war was lost before they dealt one blow. The enemy just let go. Their fledgling plummeted to the pavement hard below. Its life lived in the shadow of a crow. So now it's your turn to dive in and write a piece of flash fiction in the form of a sonnet by writing your first quatrain. So these first 4 lines of your story sonnet, you can write them with rhyme and meter now, or just outline them roughly speaking and then go back and smooth the rhyme and meter out later. But think of this as the first scene in your story. Make sure something happens in it, that is, include action, and let the reader know something about the backstory of what is going on here. The first quatrain sets the scene, and you need to pull the reader into the world of the poem immediately. If we look at that poem Mailbox, that first quatrain where he brings the packages to the door with their children's names written on them, just by reading this, although it doesn't say it, we know what's going on, right? This is the dad in a divorce dropping off the Christmas presents for the kids. And so he's wrapped them in, Christmas paper, written their names on them, and is coming to the door to drop them off. So we already have some backstory. We have the tension of this Christmas in a divorced household. Many of us know what that is like. So that sets the world of the poem. In Shadow of a Crow, you have an image of a landscape, a very placid suburban landscape, with nice houses and beautiful lawns. And overhead, what is there? Star Wars is going on, right? There's some sort of battle going on in the sky. So that's the world of that poem. Then you'll move on to the second quatrain, and the second quatrain should focus in. Think of the narration focused on the point of view of one of the characters, your protagonist or protagonists. You can include dialogue or an action that advances the direction of the story, but something happens. Your protagonist is in motion. So again, if we look at the Mailbox poem, what do we see happen in the second quatrain? The dad who's coming to drop off the presents doesn't want to set them down on the snow. So what do we know from that? Someone hasn't shoveled the snow off the front porch, right? And he tries to tap the door with his feet because he doesn't want to set these packages down and get them wet. There's nothing going on. The house is quiet. He turns around to leave, so we know he's going to have to come back, right? And what does he see? He sees that the mailbox has been knocked down in the street. And then we will learn that that provides an opportunity. It's something that has happened that opens the door, almost literally, in the third stanza. In The Shadow of a Crow, the second stanza is written really from the perspective of the two robins, right? We've learned that there's a battle to the death. Now we see that these two robins are just raging against this other creature. which is murderous, we're told. And so they are, what we see is the robins pressing their attack, right? The robins are attacking, their claws are out, they're pecking, they're diving. So we're seeing it from the perspective of our protagonists here, the robins. Then comes the turn and the sestet, which is the race to the ending, right? The volta is the pivot point of the action. So something has to happen to the protagonist, or we see and hear from the perspective of the antagonist, or the reader suddenly becomes aware of a challenging fact that is critical to the story, and that tension really comes to a peak in the beginning of those last 6 lines. At the end of the last 6 lines, it can be the last 3 lines or the last 2, there's a resolution. And like all story resolutions, it can be tragic or hopeful, devastating, or happily ever after. This is entirely your choice, right? You're the writer. So if we look at the mailbox poem, what happens in that 3rd quatrain as we're rolling into these last 6 lines? The door opens, right? The guy has turned to leave. Now what happens? The door opens. There's a sudden change. You feel his heart racing. All of a sudden he's trying not to be hopeful, but oh my goodness, his ex is coming to the door. What does she do? She speaks. We get dialogue in the poem. She says, the damn plow knocked the mailbox down again, right? And she looks right past him, although she takes the presents. What has happened? She has looked to an outside conflict, to an outside problem. She hasn't turned and yelled at him. She's looked beyond him and pointed to something else that's problematic in her life. And then we roll to the last 2 lines. He nods, in my truck, I got my toolbox, I can fix this. And what do we know? We know he's literally saying he can fix the mailbox. But it's also hopeful. It's not a happily ever after, but it is a hopeful ending, because what does he really mean? He's hoping he can fix the relationship by the fact that there's this external problem he can solve. You know, maybe that's going to mean something. He can help her out. He can fix something for her, and maybe that's an opening door for the relationship as well as the story. In Shadow of a Crow, what happens? The volta here really comes partway through on the middle line of the first 3 lines of that sestet. The robins are still attacking. They're barreling upwards. But what do we learn? They're outnumbered and they're outsized, right? The foe that they're fighting is bigger than them, and there's more of them, and they should have known that this battle was over before they had even started. What happens to us as a reader? We suddenly feel very sad about that. We were rooting for the robins thanks to the 2nd stanza. And what happens? Absolute tragedy. The crow lets go of the fledgling that it was carrying away, and it falls to the pavement, falls to the road or the driveways that we were hearing about in the 1st stanza. Its entire very short life being underneath that shadow of the crow. So there's a very tragic end to this battle that we've been rooting for the other team on. When you're all done with your poem, go back and clean up the rhyme and the meter in it. Sit there and listen to the rhyme and count out the meter on your fingers. Pick your own rhyme scheme, but think about how the rhyme reinforces the story. You've only got 14 lines to work with here, so the rhyme is another rich tool in your toolbox. It adds quite a dimension to the narrative. Change the rhyme scheme near the volta to underscore the motion of the plot. It's very subtle, it's very nuanced. Most people hearing it aren't going to be able to point to it right off the bat and say, hey, the rhyme scheme changed. But subconsciously they will hear it just the way you hear rhyme and meter in a song, and it's going to really give a lot of dynamic to your sonnet. You can choose your own meter as well. Sonnets in English are usually in iambic pentameter, and maybe you remember that phrase from high school English as well. It means there's 5 feet or 5 beats to the line. Ba-dump, 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 ba-dump. But you absolutely don't have to do that if that doesn't resonate with you. You can use 6 or 7 beats per line, like the French and Italian do. You can use 4 beats if you're a musician and counting things in 4s or 8s makes more sense to you. You can alternate 4 and 3 beats, which is called ballad meter. It's kind of a sing-songy meter that you will recognize from many nursery rhymes you were read as a child. Meter usually stays the same for the whole sonnet, but there's no sonnet police here, and you can change the meter as well as the rhyme near the volta if that helps to propel your story. Think about making the lines in the sestet shorter so they race even faster. When you're all done, read it aloud. Read your sonnet story aloud to yourself and to your friends. Are you happy with it? A lot of times poets need to sit for a little bit and then go back again and read it fresh. A sonnet usually comes out to be about 100 to 120 words, which is perfectly in line with the flash fiction prescriptions of most literary journals and the most definitions of flash fiction. If there's only 110 words in your story, every one of those words should be as strong as it possibly can be. So when you go back and read it again fresh, think about whether you can strengthen your words or your language. If you said something was really big, maybe really big works. Maybe you want humongous, monumental, enormous, looming over, something else that's a little bit more specific and powerful. Then send it off into the world. Post it with hashtag StorySonnet or send it out to a literary journal. So I hope you've enjoyed taking a fresh look at sonnets in the form of flash fiction, and I hope that you will write some and enjoy writing them and sharing them and posting them. And I've got my contact information there on Facebook and on my website, and I'd love to hear from you and see your story sonnets.